Hi, friends. Welcome to this astrology deep dive on the presidential candidates for 2024. We are going to be looking at Donald Trump's birth chart and Joe Biden's birth chart as well. There's a few disclaimers that we have to say. For one, my lens is astrological and spiritual as well. So I'm going to talk about how the specific energies look like for them as a person, as a being, as a spiritual soul on earth. And I'm also going to talk about psychic downloads and intuitive hits that I get from both of these gentlemen. The other disclaimer I want to say is that there are greater forces beyond these two potentials. And the entire concept of government and leadership and who's in charge has a lot of unseen energies and forces. And so I want us to not be ignorant about that. I want us to look at this as maybe level one, layer one of a very intricate system that's in. Throughout the reading, I will throughout the reading, I will announce when I have a personal opinion that's kind of shooting in, and you will be able to pick up on that also because there will be humor around it, as that's just the type of person that I am. So, in the consideration that there are greater forces involved, I think that there is a energetic plan or agenda, and not many people know what this really is. It's just a system in place to keep control. Okay. And then there is the collective forces, which is us, the general public, and our gifts and our light, and how we potentially do have a sway in things. It's not by voting, I don't think, but it does impact. We do have an impact on the greater picture or the greater scope. The issue with that is that we have to go within to really identify our light and our purpose and how we want to see or contribute to the world progressing. So it brings up a big discussion on social responsibility for the individual and how that is truly voted in, how you can really vote for the reality that you want to see. And is that done really just once every 4 years? Or is that done daily? Being like a presidential debate is the process of picking a leader and the process of what will benefit the collective as a group. And so everybody's needs have to come into play. Everybody's interested in their needs being met. And I think that in that concept alone, there is a distorted lens on personal needs met through something like a presidency, right? Because presidents are in the position of dealing with worldwide structures, other places in the world, other leaders in the world, and somehow need to find a way to also support the individual person in their individual circumstance. So there's so much to account for. And it's really not possible to just divide that responsibility, that leadership responsibility, into a few areas, and which are segmented in the political parties. It's just not possible. So regardless of who's in leadership or in power, the way that you can take control over your vote and over what you're wanting to see out in the world is to become literally what you want the world to be. You have to become that conduit of the example that you want to see out in the world. It's a little bit cheesy and corny, but it's just the truth. It's what it is. So this would give you that outside lens and perspective on like your entire life, depending on who's going to be in leadership. That offers a detached point of view that will allow you to see things objectively for what the world needs. So on a collective level, like what is the collective and the American people, what do they need to come into a better place in their story as a nation? When you can take the personal responsibility that you are the creator of your life and the creator of your world, that gives you the empowerment to create the situations and the scenarios that you need for yourself. When it comes to relationships, money, careers, job, yes, everything seems to be against you. And I do think that it is. But if you were to consider that somehow, right? Somehow the people of America have to deal with fake food, fake health system, fake process into a career. Like everything is not what it needs to be. And yet somehow there's so many souls who break through that to live in divinity and live in their truth. We're still able to find ourselves for the most part and create a successful life through us with working through our karmic patterns and our karmic astrology and coming into our life purpose. But again, the reason I'm mentioning this is because this will give you so much of a detached point of view when it comes to these people and the greater landscape that's taking place in the Americas on the greater scale. And we're talking about 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now. We need change. We need a change in how all the institutions are run and done. We need changes in our food. We need changes in our jobs and careers. We need changes in our healthcare system. We need changes in supporting the people who need help. We need changes in the people who have the ability to support or help or money, right? There's everything essentially needs a change. So you want to see America as having two um, blows. First, America's going through its Pluto return, which is completely separate to the cosmic climate. So a Pluto return for America is like changing these shifts, changing all these institutions, and reestablishing the definition of status and power. And then you also have the collective energy of Pluto going into Aquarius, which is bringing forward a universal age of Aquarius, like for Earth and the solar system. They're all going through this birthing process. And so then we come into a zoomed in version of this whole story, and we're now voting for the next 4 years of our experience, or the next 4 years of our reality, and we're choosing what we want to see and experience for the next 4 years. When in consideration, the concepts we're thinking about is what's going to change these greater institutions, like and honestly, that takes time. It takes time, and it takes more than 8 years of a person's leadership, in just my opinion. Now, something else that I do want to say too is that 4 years ago, when Donald Trump was running and Biden as well, the astrology like highly suggested that Trump was going to win. And it was so incredible to see because when we look at Donald Trump's chart, I'll be able to explain so much more of his energy out in the world. And you just couldn't ignore that Trump was supposed to be in the position of leadership. And there was nothing really pointing at Biden being a president, in my opinion, astrologically. Now, I'm talking about 4 years ago. So the fact that the odds defied astrology, I think, is a testament to the greater forces that are at play. There's something else, something bigger that is trying to buy time. And we saw that 4 years ago with Biden being initiated into the presidency and how that shook the world. Now they started this whole very controversial campaign that Trump was the election was frauded or something like this. And who knows? Who knows? But when it comes to the astrology, he he was someone who was going to be in some kind of leadership position. So it's shocking when he did not astrologically. So I mentioned this because we're going to read the astrology, but we cannot account for the greater forces that are at play who use dark magic and black magic. It's just the truth, right? It's 2024. We can say it. They're using the dark arts to do and bend their will. And we see that, I mean, day to day. And that's even opening a can of worms when it comes to what dark magic is, how it's been influencing humanity for decades, for eons. So it's almost like because of that, I read the overall energy versus predicting who's going to be in that position, because there's intervention all the time, dark intervention all the time. And anyways, all that does is buy them time and stretch out their storylines for just a little bit longer. Okay, so here we have Donald Trump's chart, Donnie. And here, there's so many reasons why I love his chart. It's just fascinating to look at. And I'm pretty sure if you've read other astrologers talk about it, they would be saying things along the same lines, because you cannot deny this man has incredible magnetic energy. So, one of the first things to consider is that Donald was born maybe a few hours before an eclipse, and this eclipse was in Gemini and Sagittarius. So it was a full moon eclipse. The sun at the time of his birth was in Gemini, and then the south node, the moon was in Sagittarius. So when a person is born under an eclipse, it is a person that is going to be known for the most part, whether it is worldwide or within their city and within their hometown. This person tends to have an impact in their environment because their energy is drawing in so much frequency, and it almost asks for other people to pay attention to it, because whatever they do, it's almost like having a touch or a sense of Midas golden touch. Whatever that person does inherently fractures the environment, and their decisions are noticed incredibly. And this could cause a controversial person, and it could cause an innovator. What makes an innovator is a person born on a new moon eclipse. That's a person who's reinventing the stage, and they're creating something new. So they're in the position of the inventor or the innovator. A person who has the full moon eclipse energy is a disruptor. They are the ones who are meant to show the chaos that has to be organized and reformed. So their core job is to bring turmoil in some ways and bring a voice to the noise that probably isn't being heard enough. So the fact that Donald Trump is born on a full moon eclipse brings a karmic responsibility to shake up the minds of people. Now, the way he's going to do this is going to be by the Gemini star system, which Gemini star system is in charge of the human mind, the human brain. So whenever you see a Gemini, a person who has Mercury in Gemini, South Node in Gemini, Saturn in Gemini, they're masters at how the human psyche thinks, creates thoughts, speaks, and communicates. And because they are mastered in this, they have the gift of networking, right? So they know how to bring minds together. And it's a gift because it requires intelligence that is unique to the person, and an incredible suave to words, writing, books, speaking. And so they're very charismatic and convincing because they're using words that probably the average person isn't using. So to give this some perspective, when we go into the Sagittarius star system and the archetype that Sagittarius is, being the opposite of Gemini, Sagittarius is now the universal brain, and it steps out of the human thought process and it goes into the universe's thought process. And this is why Sagittarius rules over universal laws, because What the Sagittarius archetype does is unify all forms, whether you're a nebula, a planet, an alien, anything of the sort, or a human. All of these beings that are alive, or an ant, they all have to abide to the universal laws. And the universal laws are as above, so below. There's several of them. I say that there's mainly 12, and there's a video on my YouTube about it. But these universal laws are almost automatic, and they have to be respected and upheld. Otherwise, you face judgment, you face God, you face, a higher power that says you're going to be kicked out of the solar system, go into another galaxy, because these are the rules to play in this universal galaxy. And so you can imagine that it takes us into a completely different thread than the human brain, right? Gemini is focused on, the details of the mind. What's the fact of the day? What's the fact of paying bills? And Sagittarius is concerned about what is God want us to do? What are the principles to keep this whole system afloat? They're very different energies. That's why they're completely opposite. And the concept of Sagittarius, it's invisible. Just like Gemini, the human brain is scientific. We have to scientifically study it. Sagittarius is invincible. It's the garment between Earth and the planets. There's a in between that looks like my background. What's happening there? We can track it down by math, but then everything else after math becomes objective. And that's where philosophy is born. And that's where everybody's individual belief system is conceptualized, because everybody has their own definition of the invisible, and nobody's right or wrong. We can't really prove it because it's subjective. So when a person is born with this, and Donald is born with the North Node in Gemini, his point and his mission and his life purpose is to crack open the human mind. And what is he cracking the human mind open from? From the existing threads of belief systems. And it's said that for Donald Trump to be able to do this, he has the karmic background, or the karmic fabric of institutions. I would even say that he possibly has a past life in creating politically the religions that we're in, the extreme religions, Christianity and Catholicism. He could have had a part, and so he comes here to rectify that. And he's like, okay, I'm going to wake people up from their sleep, wake people up from this religion or this belief system that has kept them spiritually weak and spiritually dependent on books and church buildings and pastors and all that stuff. It's possible. But with his North Node in Gemini, it says, I know what's on the other side. I know how you get into a cult. I know what creates cult behavior. I know what creates religion. I know what creates this dependency on having a ladder to God. So because I know that those ins and outs, I can get people to begin thinking for themselves again by cracking holes into their story. So he comes in here to literally crack the mind. He's doing these shocking statements that makes people question. Now, of course, Gemini is expresses itself in duality. And that is exactly what fragments the mind, because the mind gets really comfortable in one reality. I'm a barber. I'm an astrologer. I'm 12 years old. I'm 5 years old. that's the reality that Sagittarius wants. It wants the title, it wants the concept, the principle. And Gemini says, well, what if you are 4 years old, but also you're, an you're an inventor. Like you can be both at the same time. What if you're an astrologer, but you're also a mechanic? You can do both things. So it creates reality and it creates fragments in the reality where we go, oh, I didn't even think that I could do several things at once. And that's where the human mind begins to split in some ways. When you live in two realities. And that's what Gemini does so well. Everybody else is trying to get Gemini to unify. And they're like, that's not my point. My point as a Gemini is to express duality. So for every person that gets frustrated with the two sides of Gemini, well, you're missing the point. And Donald Trump has a life purpose to express duality, which is why he's confusing. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he playing in the bad field or is he playing in the good field? I'm telling you right now and forever and always, he's going to play both sides of the field. He's going to play both sides. He's going to play with the dark. He's going to play with the light. He's going to play with what the agenda is. And then he's also going to play with the light agenda. And he can handle it. Not every person can do that. It would be so frustrating for any other placement, especially a fixed sign. You couldn't hold the space for that duality. It's crazy. How could you live two lives in one day minimum? Yet Donald Trump can do it easily by noon. So the best way to digest a person like Donald Trump is to not even put him in a good or bad box, because anyway, you don't get that from any president or from any politician. You don't get it. You get the showcasing of a position. You get the Biden, this is what I stand for, but in reality, truthfully, no. They're doing whatever they want, whatever's serving them politically anyway. And so he's just transparent about it. He's just like, this is what I need from the bad side. This is what I need from the good side. And as long as I'm shaking shit up, I'm good for the most part. Now, he has a beautiful conjunction with Uranus and the North Node. I'm sorry. I love it. I love it because his social responsibility is to make change. This guy truly doesn't give a rat's behind if he is offending anyone or if he is socially accepted and the norm. But it's like that's the person that America needs. That's the person that you need to overthrow rulership. Because one of my astrology teachers mentioned it. I never forgot it because I thought it was so amazing. If we need to overthrow a ruler, we're going to send Aries to break down the door. And then we're going to send an Aquarius to tell that ruler to get the fuck up and off, to go the fuck home. And that always stuck with me because it's almost like you would think that an Aries would do that. But it's really the Aquarian energy who doesn't give a rat's tahootie of what the expectation is. And unfortunately, Aries tends to demise at the battle. And that's almost like that's why Aries is seen as the hero, because only the Aries had the courage to boom, 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 bust down the doors. And it found that process exhilarating. Whereas an Aquarius is like, well, I want to tell the person to get the fuck off. You know what I mean? So we have to admire both of these zodiac signs for what they carry. So anyway, that analogy always stuck in my head because I realized the power of Aquarius and the power of Uranus and how it is so dictative that you just don't even have an opportunity to say anything more. So Donnie comes with that conjunction, that Uranus North Node conjunction. He has full cosmic permission to cause chaos. The people don't like it because it's different and it's not spoon-fed. But don't you know that we desperately need different? We desperately need different, regardless of where it could potentially take us, which I honestly have good faith. I have faith that wherever this Donnie Orange guy would take us is a starting point into something new, into something different. But you have to consider that this person will always play both fields. And if you're somebody who just wants your story done and over with, you're going to be uncomfortable. Well, guess what? It's uncomfortable times. So do you want someone who's going to pretend or someone who's just going to do it? Fuck it. Has the strength to cause that disruption. Donald has a karmic free pass. Donnie has a karmic free pass in causing disruption. That's his soul contract. Do we get that? That's his soul contract, is to disrupt the human mind in efforts to wake them up. Because Uranus always leads to enlightenment. Whether you like the shakeup or not, it's going to lead to realizations. So considering that Donald Trump has his progressed moon right now at 5 degrees of Scorpio, which is 5 degrees of Scorpio would land in his third house right here. And this brings support in status, power dynamics. And because this is happening in his third house of Gemini, I think that we're going to see more focus in him during this presidential run. We're going to see more focus, more intention, more details around his initial goals, and more seriousness too. I think we're going to get a more serious side out of him this time. Now, interestingly, the North Node is also in his 8th house of Scorpio. So this is power dynamics that are in his favor. And he does have Pluto retrograde or Pluto in Aquarius happening still in his 5th house of leadership. So I have a more organic perspective of this person or him being in a leadership position. But again, I'm not counting or betting on it because of what happened 4 years ago, where we saw the same thing. Something else that I wanted to mention too, I don't want to leave out this detail. His North Node and his Sun and his Uranus is also happening in the 10th house of the public. So believe it or not, now Donald is older now. So, but I do think that at a younger age, it was really hard for him to come out into the world. It took change for him. And he probably has a grief story around his childhood, around his mother, around his upbringing. And it took that pain and grief for him to come out into the world. Because when your North Node is in the 10th house, you had to get comfortable with that public position. Because left up to you, you would be at home, traveling, or just learning, being a teacher at home for Donald. But instead, he chose to come out and just do his business world. And it's very public and very prominent out in the world. So going back to his progressed moon and into the transits of 2024, there is a lot of empowerment that will come with him speaking up his mind. In theory, there is more of an openness to him and an openness to his focus, and people will start to see what he was trying to do during his presidency. People are going to start understanding what his goals were. And so I'm actually showing pictures of him in 2017, which I think is interesting because when you see pictures, and I want you to note this for Biden's reading, when you see pictures of him and compare it to 2024, he looks the same. You could still see consciousness in his eyes. And he's probably like, the only difference I see is a more stable orange color to him. like 2017, he was experimenting with shades, right? Like that's a shade, that's a shade. Like we have several different shades we were getting comfortable with. But by 2024, it's like a pretty stable um cool tone orange, which we could appreciate, right? That's the only difference that I see. But when it comes to his vitality in his eyes, you still see a person in there. You still see a person, truthfully. There's a human in there with opinions. There's still a person in there. I want you to note that for Biden's reading. So I also see Jupiter that is in Gemini, right? And Jupiter is going to be going over his 10th house, naturally shows an expansion in career for the next year. But beyond that, I'm looking at Uranus that is crashing into that 10th house. So this Donald is getting ready to even complete his life purpose with a Uranus return. And that's going to come in years. I don't even know if he'll be here by then, but this is a coming full circle energy for Donald. And I would love to see him finish out this humongous project that he has on his soul contract. I think it's the shifts, the beginning shifts and changes that the American people need. I want to say whether you like it or not, it can always be cleaned up later, but for this job, he can handle it. He can handle it. He has the sovereignty, karmic permission, and the cosmic support to carry out the next phase of humanity. Joe Biden's birth charts. Joe Biden. So what do we have here? Energetically, you can, if you're an intuitive astrologer, energetically, you can feel when a person is tapped into their astrology chart, which is basically their purpose and their energetic algorithm. Joe Biden is not. I do not even see an energetic tie or connection to his story. I think that there's um several different versions of Biden. I think there's been soul transfers, and he's a shell of whatever the fuck he was at the beginning stages of his life. And I say that because when you're looking at a person's energetic chart, if this is the real chart, right? In theory it is. When the chart just completely derails and it doesn't even follow his astrology and it doesn't even match what his birth chart should conceptualize and like what it's suggesting, then there's one of two things wrong. You're looking at the wrong chart, or the person is not in their will. The person is not acting in their will. They're taken over. And I firmly do believe spiritually that there's something else operating Joe Biden. It's not him. So to start a case here, I kind of looked up pictures of Biden in 2026. This is who people thought that they were voting in whenever he went into presidency. Like, this is the Biden that they thought they were going to get, right? There's somewhat of a presence in his eyes. Yeah, there's intentionality. He was next to a conditioned pro Obama. So there was a lot of psychological trust into Obama, and the fact that he was connected to him, it just played into it. It's a different version of him. You could tell that there was more energy to him, more vitality. Even if it was a little bit of like personality, but it was there, right? So this is the person that initially people thought was going into office. I think that, again, he's been transferred. There's been soul transfers several times. And I think that one of the last ones was whatever this initiation was. Whatever Obama did to this man was when that consciousness left that man's eyes. Okay. And the fact that there's tears, God knows what that means. Okay. That is a occult initiation. And in my opinion, this is when we started to see Joe Biden's life force just completely gone. You can see it in this picture. Where did he go? Oh, I'm sorry. What are you staring at? It looks like he's being sacrificed, actually. He's like gasping for air. Who knows what was going on underneath that building? But there was an ejection that happened here. Again, we don't know for what. We're not going to know for what. We could just energetically, psychically tune into this. We need to ask Sloan Bella. But that is the point of no return. Bye bye, Biden. What? Where did you go? Where did your eyes go? If you're watching this on the Karma Scopes podcast, apologize. Please visit my YouTube and look at this video. Now we go to Biden in 2024. I'm sorry, 2024. Who is this guy? Right? We can't even really see his eyes. Is that intentional? I mean, you could say plastic surgery, but how much are we going to forgive in the name of plastic surgery? Right? There's a drastic shift in consciousness and just like a void. You see a complete energetic shell in him. And what happens is when you have a shell like this, any being can act through it. Any being can present itself through him. And that's why he's a perfect person to have there on stage. He's a perfect one that can bring forward the will of others. Now, Joe Biden's chart scary as fuck. Okay. Interestingly, Joe Biden is also a full moon baby. He's not a traditional full moon baby because his moon is at 0 degrees of Taurus and the sun is at 27 degrees of Taurus. So technically speaking, the moon would have to be almost at the end of its transit for him to be considered a full moon baby. But in my books, he was born a day before the full moon, a day and a half or so before the full moon. So it still has the full moon implications because the moon is in the opposite of Scorpio, which is Taurus. So in my books, I'm reading this as a soft new moon energy, full moon energy. So Joe Biden's sun, Mercury, Venus are on the 12th house of his birth chart. Scorpio energy, a Scorpio stellium for one, is their MO is to be hidden, right? Privacy is the name of the game. Privacy, power, status is the name of a Scorpio stellium. And so it's like it is beyond obsessive. It cannot even conceptualize having fun time or just nothing is worth it. Nothing is worth it for a Scorpio stellium and a Scorpio sun. Like the reason they're so focused and so tunnel vision about any subject that they're interested in is because anything else is just not worth it. There's so much pleasure in seeing something from all different angles. And I kind of know this because I have Mars in Scorpio conjunct Pluto in the 8th house. So I understand it. That's how I get with my astrology and how I'm not able to turn away from it or turn around from it because I'm so obsessed with it and I'm 10 years in. But it's like the gift that keeps on giving. You can study astrology till, Earth, and there's still more to study. So a person who has the Scorpio energy and it's in the 12th house, then there's so much vulnerability to power dynamics and to status and money. And it's if Scorpio is hidden behind the scenes, then the 12th house it's like all of this hidden package is buried in another planet. It'll never see the time of day. It'll never be seen. the 12th house stuff, 12th house energy is not meant to be seen in the physical conscious world. It is something that you can only tap into it energetically, psychically, through the Akashic records. So, whatever the hell is here, you need an antenna to it. So, his son, which is his poor ego, is hidden away. We don't know what's behind his will. At the beginning, it could have been his own pure egoistic drive for power, but over time, it could be anything, any energetic being, entity, institution, anything like that. And the weird thing about it too is that it creates like a power dynamic too, where it's like dominant submissive, dominant submissive, dominant submissive. So in his lifetime, he could have been both positions, submissive to something, dominant to something else, submissive to something, dominant to something else. And that is almost karmic for him. That is a karmic cycle with the South Node in Pisces for him. And he represents like the true definition of distortion. He's the definition of a distorted reality. His soul contract, in many ways, is to make the obvious so obvious that you can't deny it. When you look at him, you cannot deny that this is almost clownish behavior. It is clownish behavior. Like you need to go somewhere else you need to go to bed, but you're not doing that because of this power dynamic, the status that you want, the status that the cardinal wants to have. Daisy edit. Now, when it comes to the transits happening in real time, he does have the South Node in the 10th house, which is the dethroning of power, dethroning or a career change or a shift in your job. That's almost like what happens when this cycle takes place. Do I think he's experiencing that? No, because I think other people are in charge of his story. I don't think he's in his will. He's not in his sovereignty and free will. So this is why I say I don't even know if this is going to come forward, because there's other higher powers at play here. But in theory, reading the astrology chart, he would not survive a presidential election, not with the South Node in his 10th house. He also has Jupiter going over Saturn, which could start a new, I guess you could say, political storyline. But what's interesting is astrologically, I see a checkout point for him. When you're looking at people, sometimes you see opportunities where the person can check out and just leave consciousness, aka pass away. And I do see an opportunity that will come for him in 2 months or so where he can go back home. So it'll be interesting to see if he takes that. In theory, another thing that I'm seeing too is exposure of connections, exposure of people he's tied to. Are we going to see that? Who knows? It could be covered up, it could not. But again, this is a person who's attached and has tentacles into the weakness that essentially creates the world that we see. So yeah, there is potential here for exposure in partnerships and relationship that this person has. It just wouldn't make sense. So it feels almost empty in trying to read this birth chart. It feels empty in regards to reading potentials ahead. Because again, as I said, this is a person that's a shell of themselves. So the end question becomes, what does America need? When it comes to what America needs, we're looking at these two gentlemen's Pluto. And so Biden has Pluto transiting his second house. So his way of helping supposedly helping the Americans is going to be by financially supporting them, financially doing changes to bring back power to the Americas. Um, and this could be by unifying the dollar to the one world's coin or something like that. It looks like the energy would be there. So this Biden is centered around money transfers and money dynamics, which of course leads to the working class. So if there's something that he's going to change or reform, is going to be the average American's work experience and the trades that America does with other people. When it comes to what Donnie would transform and give to the Americas, it has to do with leadership. And it looks like he would really start off at the leadership that the American peoples need. So his focus, if anything, would be on just being the father or the paternal energy that the world is needing, and just um, reestablishing the definition of what a world leader looks like. So his banking points would be there. And it could almost be seen as the conception of everything else, because that's where everything's born, in the leadership, which continues on to the story that Trump's story is karmic. And look at his Pluto. His Pluto's in the 12th house in Leo. I am sorry, but Donald Trump is so, his chart is so crazy. Karmically, you could spend hours studying his chart. It's fascinating from a karmic point of view. It's truly, truly breathtaking. There's so much material here. You see this person living a true life anyway. I hope that this reading did not trigger anybody and you could just take it in for what it is. And I hope that you understand my position in not formally doing a prediction of who's going to be in charge, as we understand that there's on ultimately higher powers at play, and it doesn't always read in the astrology, not in that aspect. If you are somebody who wants to know what your karmic story looks like in your life and in your birth chart, you can get my exclusive karmic astrology report called Karmic Patterns. And this is a report generated from your specific birth chart. And it will tell you the karma that you have in this lifetime and in past lives. And it'll also tell you the gifts and the blessings that you come in with. So if that is something that you want to gain and get, please go to my website and get the Karmic Patterns report. I also do private readings on Zoom where you can talk to me and have me read your chart, which is my life purpose and ultimately what I absolutely love to do. And so you will get my Scorpio focus in your birth chart readings in full capacity. Now I also do TikTok live stream readings almost daily. So check out my Instagram bio for my TikTok schedule of the week so you can hop on and join me for a tarot, astrology, or both reading. You can also do synastry for soul contract readings with you and your partners or friends, boyfriends, parents, kids, anything like that. I would love to tell you about your cosmic stories. It's what I'm here to do. And if this was helpful, entertaining, or insightful for you, I would appreciate any support that you do on this page or on this platform, whether it's liking, sharing, subscribing, favoriting, anything like that. It is worth a ton. So, my favorite planet is Saturn, and that's because he rules over time. And so, I want to thank you guys all so much for your time and your presence and your support in this video. If you made it into this part of the video, I appreciate your presence and just being here, commenting, like, and supporting, and all that, because I know that time is invaluable. And so, thank you so much for being here. Bye, friends.